In this video, we're going to modify a fuel tank for this 1975 280 SL, install it, hook up all the fuel assembly lines, and if we have time, we'll have a go and see what happens if we try and start this car, at least fill it with fuel, and if not, we'll come back to that in a later video. Before we put this fuel tank in our red project car over there, we're going to modify it so that it fits the old style fuel sender. Now, this old style fuel sender is tested and it works. We've bought a new gasket from Mercedes to put around there. This is the part number for the rubber seal ring. It's the same for the old style and the new style fuel senders. 107 997 134564. Probably the cheapest place to get it is Mercedes. This tank, as I've mentioned in previous videos, is, I think they're the only type of tank you can get these days, and this is designed for a screw-in sender, and we're going to modify it. We've taken the plate off our old Dejectronic tank and we are going to use 3M panel bond to glue that on there. And then that is going to allow this to fit in there just like it would normally, like so. And we will then have the OEM fuel sender attachment on this tank. There we go, we've taken the top E-coat off this tank. Before we put our primer coat on, we're using this 7010 just to remove any dirt and grease and anything else. When we put this panel bond here, we need to be careful that none of it squeezes into the threads here. As a precaution, I've put grease on the threads and that will stop the panel bond sticking to it. But if you get panel bond in those threads there, once this is glued down, it'll be very difficult to get it out. Use this tube of panel bond for a year, so it remains to be seen if it still comes out. One of the things I've been really impressed with, though, with this panel bond is the fact that it's still usable. They have such a good cap on there. So if I can get it off with one hand, silver locking cap off, you just unscrew this, revealing the... Oh, really wish I hadn't just dropped that top into the tank. That was super annoying. It's a good job my fishing skills are still there. The green cap out, you need to get one of these one-time use nozzles, and these nozzles, they basically mix the glue as the glue passes through the nozzle in exactly the right proportions, and you just tighten that up and hopefully that bond goes into one of these special applicators that only fits in one way. The first time I use this, I just like to squeeze a little bit out first to make sure that it's coming out evenly. Now we can just screw that nozzle on. Once again, we're just going to get a little sample bit out the end here. See that glue passing through the nozzle. There we go. We're going to start off with a thin primer bead. Just going to cover all of that bare metal. You do not need a lot of this. Next, we're going to put a very thin primer bead on here as well. Got to be really careful not to get this in the threads. Finish the process, we're going to put a last bead on there and then just clamp the two things together using a magnet. We're going to put the bead near the edge, outer edge, because as I say, we do not want any squeeze through coming into the threads if we can possibly avoid it. Now, to clamp that down, we are going to use some neodymium magnets, and these neodymium magnets have a 50 kilogram pull, and you do not want two of them to snap together. There we go, that will be dry in the morning. In fact, it'll be dry before then. We haven't got any squeeze out onto the threads, which is good. I'm just going to go around and tidy up some of this. You could simply just weld this ring on, but my experience of welding is that when you weld, you burn through the primer on the other side of the tank, and that's exactly where you'll get moisture from any air in the tank. So the advantage of panel bond is it gives you a waterproof seal, and you don't end up burning off any primer on the underside of the piece you're working on. It's the next day and this panel bond is dry. We've just got to make sure that we don't put these magnets together. If all has gone to plan, we should be able to drop in our Dejectronic fuel sender and screw that down tight like that. And that is that modified. I will come back and actually tidy all of this up. Also just arrived in the post is a couple of aluminium crush washers which we'll need to reseal the fuel strainer that comes with this tank. Is put in this non-OEM strainer. Now the crush washer that came with it is obviously a one-time use crush washer, so we've got a couple of these from eBay, and we'll just put one on and then tighten that down hopefully so it doesn't leak. Do the job. She cut out the thread fitting from the other tank, and if I had a welder or a proper workshop and could cut a perfect hole out, I probably would have just welded that in and then used the OEM strainer, but I'm going to go with this strainer for the time being and see how we get on. We're going to glue on these rubber pads here which we took off our gold parts car. There's one to protect that fitting there, there's 3 rubber strips, and there's one to protect the return fitting here. Refurbishing a Mercedes, you're going to need 6 to 10 of these by the time you've done all the carpets, the seats and the underbonnet insulation, etc. Cut off all the bits we don't want to get glue on and just spray that up. Sprayed that side up. We just need to take all of this off now. First strip on, we did manage to get some overspray of glue here, but that's not a tragedy. Just finish that off with the other 2 strips. Rubber protection strips all stuck on the tank. Next we need to put on these brackets. Now these came off our golden parts car, and originally they would have been a sort of gold colour. We've just rust encapsulated them and gone over them with chassis black. It's not OEM, but this is not something you'll see, and it should hopefully protect them from rusting. Now when we put that on there, we are going to scratch off some of this paint in e-coat, so we're going to put a liberal bead of grease along there, not only to help protect it in the future but to help that slide on. We finished replacing the nice simple grommets here. These are the grommets in the boot. There's 6 of these, but these appear all over the car, in the sills, in the bumpers. I don't think you can ever buy too many of them. 000 987 4944. 2 specialised grommets that go in here and here. One for the bell-shaped hose that comes from the breather, and one for the electrical wires. Now we will actually be snipping the electrical wires and replacing them because they're damaged at the other end. Here's the wire that's going to attach to the fuel pump, but it's pretty knackered. It's held here by one of these Mercedes cable ties. We've got a whole load of those, so we're going to cut that and then pull that wire through. The way these Mercedes cable ties work is that this bit here fits into the hole, and then to lock it into place you push that pin in and it spreads this out and locks it in place. It's a good idea to put a bit of grease or oil on there when you're trying to get it in, because if you just try and put that in a hole like that, it won't always fit in that easily. So we're just going to put a little dab of grease on there. All new cable ties in here. So these are the wires that are on the car at the moment, and these are the wires from the parts car. You can see they've still got the rubber cap on. What we're just going to do is replace this grommet. Now it looks like one of these grommets here, but it's not. It's a special grommet, and that's the part number there, 1169973481. I don't know if you can see this, but these grommets, when they're new, are super tight around that wire, and my advice is actually to put some grease on there. Otherwise what you'll risk doing is splitting the grommet, and they are actually quite expensive. So we're just going to thread this through now and then fit that grommet. This grommet here for the breather pipe is another custom shape again. It's an angled grommet, and we're going to take one off the parts car. The grommet for the breather hose here, it's easiest to fit it from below, whereas that grommet there, it's easiest to fit from above. That's that grommet in. So next we need to just make sure the fuel sender wires are in the right place, and put the fuel tank in, bolt it down here with some nice stainless steel bolts, and that should be that done. I'm going to install the tank with the hoses that connect to the breather tank attached to it. Now there's 2 lengths of hose here, they're both exactly the same length. Once again, so we're going to put a little bit of grease on here just to help those slip on. Unfortunately, the hose clips we originally ordered for around here were stainless steel 11 to 13. What we actually needed is 9 to 11. they just fit much better and clamp those hoses tighter, so we've just ordered some more. Actually, two size grommets for the fuel tank filler cap, and we bought this one originally, which unfortunately is the wrong size and won't fit. It's way too small to fit around there. This is the style that you need here, and that fits in there perfectly. These are the little grommets here that fit here and here and stop the filler cap bashing into there. The part number there, 107-987-0140, not expensive, £2.70 each. And similarly, 123-997-3581 is the rubber grommet that goes around the filler cap as the correct one for this car. Very easy to get these on back to front. The curved side, the slightly smaller side, goes at the back, like so, and we'll put that on first. Now the way to get this tank in is you thread this through the filler hole first, so the tank goes in at a slight angle. You lift it up and then you put that side in first, line those holes up first, and then push the tank forward. It's probably easiest to put the header tank in first. Now in our particular case, because our header tank lead here got broken, we can actually thread that through the grommet in situ, but your header tank's going to have that grommet in it. My advice would be to fit that first and put the header tank to one side and then fit the fuel tank. Start off threading this through first. The tank is going to be angled out that way, and then you're going to push that side in. Those holes line up there, which is great. We just need to remember that the fuel breather hose still needs to come down there. These washers are quite specialist here, and they're quite expensive as well. If you do need to buy them, this is the part number here, 108-990-990-0340, and those washers, as four of them, are used to attach the tank to those brackets. Of events is you have a bolt, and you have a spring washer, and then you have the washer below bolts that hold the tank in. Are actually not too bad, the ones that came out of the car, but we're going to be replacing them with stainless steel M8 25mm bolts. It helps if you've cleaned up those threads and make sure that those bolts go in nice and easily, because it's very tight fit to get your hand in there. You've got all the bolts in finger tight. My advice would be just to thread this grommet in and make sure you can get that in. Grommet is properly seated, it's not kinked like it is there. These back bolts are a little bit tricky to get to. It helps if you've got a wobble bit on your socket set or a ratchet spanner with a flexible head to get these 13mm bolts done up. We've secured the tank. We can drop in our fuel sender into our modified tank in the knowledge that that is actually the correct fuel sender for this car, and plug that in, screw it down with the locking cap, and then pop on the plastic cup. And then we just need to line up the two holes here and here to screw the header tank on. It's in there nicely tightly. Just clip that cap on. Now getting these two screw holes here lined up with the holes on the back here when you can't see what you're doing is very difficult. The way I'm going to do it is just use a little piece of horsehair. You could use a thin piece of copper wire here to tie that onto there, and then I'm going to thread it through first, so when I pull this through I will know that the holes actually line up. All we have to do is pull this through gently without breaking it, and those holes will line up. I love it when a theory comes together. That's allowed us to line that hole up, and we can just snap that little thread off now. These pipes are incredibly tight on the little tubes up there, so I'm just heating them with a hairdryer to soften the rubber up a little bit, and that makes it easier to get them on tightly. Now that we've got the tank in, I'm just putting the correct M550 screws and nuts and bolts in here, making sure everything's tightened up. We've got the right cable clips in, and then we'll just connect the fuel hoses and the filter. I'm just lying under the car here. This pipe here we are planning on gluing into this fitting using the Permatex Aviation gasket, because there is no natural seal for that screw thread into this non-OEM fitting, and I think if we just leave it like that it's going to leak. So I'm going to just cut this pipe to length. It's slightly too long, so I've just marked it here, and then that will attach to the pulsation damper. We'll glue that in first, then we'll attach that to the pulsation damper, and then I think we're pretty much done down here. We've trimmed that to size. couple of centimeters off there. Now we just need to coat these threads here with the Permatex Aviation Gasket 3. This stuff here is a non-permanent sealer, so if we do ever need to get this off, we can do, but it'll seal those threads and stop them leaking. There we go, we've coated those threads. We can get that in the car. There we go, we have sealed that in. Now we just need to connect the pulsation damper. This is the new pulsation damper, which we got from these guys in Germany, SLS, and it transpires it is just a hollow chamber. There's no diaphragm inside there, so in fact, we could have just cleaned up the original one and used that. These are 16 to 80 in stainless steel. You're going to need 3 of them, 1 for the top of the pipe and 2 here. This little piece of foam here came from the parts car, and it goes around this hose that goes from the fuel filter up to the engine, and then it's cable tied with one of the Mercedes cable ties to this little bracket here. We're just in the final stages of putting everything together here. This is the short piece of hose that connects the return feed to the tank, to the return line. At some stage we will be replacing these lines, but first of all we're going to see if we can get this car going. These hose clamps are 11 to 13 mil. Originally I'd bought 14 to 16 mil, which is too big, but 11 to 13 mil stainless steel hose clamps. We've finished hooking up everything. The only thing we haven't done is put the cover on. The fuel pumps on the earlier SLs are smaller than the later SLs, and the fuel pump covers were actually made out of steel and are much smaller than the later SLs as well. This one here that came off the parts car is too rusty to use, so we started making up our own. Unfortunately, I realised that the rusted out section actually has some crucial bits of metal that I need to put that together, so we're going to have to start that again at another time. We've replaced all the hoses, refurbished the fuel pump, new filter, new fuel damper, new hose clips everywhere, new wires. That's all looking tickety-boo underneath there. You do need to take this panel out or put it in. That corner goes in first, and then it fits down here, and you can put it in without scratching it all off. If you try and do it the other way, you'll either break the aerial off or scratch the hose here. We've got that last boot panel in, and I hope you'll agree this is starting to look OEM and like a proper Mercedes. We've still got to carpet this boot section. We have got the carpet set to do that, but there's a few little bits of tidying up I need to do first with the wiring, etc. A lot of the work we've done you'll never see, the new fuel tank, new stainless steel fittings and hoses, but all of that will be good for the next 50 years. In the next video, we'll either be having a go at starting this car, see what happens, and we still need to do the rear bumper on here. Obviously, we've got brakes, exhaust, and various other bits and pieces to do, but we are slowly but surely getting there and getting ever closer to our ambition of getting this car running by the summer.